Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing Midjourney version 7 in its current alpha state, and we're also going to be seeing if it's worth the cost of, the subscription. So Midjourney version 7 has came out effectively today. I mean, probably about 12 hours ago. It came out in an alpha state. And over time, if you currently don't have access to it just yet, you will get access to it within the next 2 weeks to the next month, possibly. Midjourney has put out a report saying that they're going to be adding new features across time throughout the next 2 months. So if you currently have access to Midjourney version 7, don't be surprised for new features to emerge within, like I said, a 2 week to 2 month period without time. New features will be rolled in. Now, I'm going to be doing a review of Midjourney version 7. The current images that you're seeing on my screen are not Midjourney version 7 images. They're actually Midjourney version 6.1 images. In fact, if you want to go ahead and toggle what version you're creating, when you create an image in Midjourney, you go over here to settings, and you could see here we have version 6.1, we have version 7. I was currently working on version 6.1. And if you see here, I can go ahead and take the exact same prompt. We'll go ahead and click version 7 here, and we'll just kind of see what happens. Now, version 7 has something quite interesting. We have standard mode and we have draft mode. We'll talk about draft mode in a few minutes here, but I do want to kind of show you guys the point that when an image is created in version 7, there's a little number here that says V7 right next to the prompt, or underneath in this case. Now, version 7 reportedly is supposed to be faster, more accurate, and really has a specialization in creating better images that seem hyper-realistic. Now, you guys will be the judge of that. If you see a lot of my different images here, I was looking specifically to create a lot of illustrations. This was for a YouTube automation type video that I was creating, more of a story documentary style that relates to the story of St. Patrick. So if you're familiar with my last video, I was basically telling you guys that there are different ways to produce income, and one of the methods that I am curious about, and I will be exploring, which I did finish my first project, is creating videos on YouTube in a documentary style format. In order for me to do that, I need images to be produced. What better software that exists, better than Midjourney? I mean, there's only a few, but effectively none. So Midjourney is here, and we can go ahead and compare some of these images. Now, something that I will say, in order for me to access Midjourney version 7, I had to run through a personalization test, and I'll kind of share with you here where I was essentially forced to review 200 plus images. So just like this, I had to essentially click on an image, and once I found an image that I preferred, it would essentially record that output effectively, and that is considered my profile. What I personally did throughout time was I skipped a lot of images because I just wasn't satisfied with either or. I'm not necessarily recommending that you do the same thing. I'm just simply letting you know what I did in order to gain access to version 7. Now, when you create a version 7 profile, you're essentially looking at different images that have been created, and you're selecting your preference between the two. This is the only thing that you can do in order to even gain access to version 7. When we go over here to create, we can utilize our profile data, and we can have a prompt implemented. So for example, if I want to implement my preferences on my profile, and I have the same prompt, I could just go ahead and hit submit. And the interesting thing about this, when I submit it, like I said, is it's going to use some sort of influence from this score. Now, the reason why I actually typically turn off my global profile, especially in this case, version 7, or really all the other versions in the past, is because I personally don't like majority of the images that are posted on this personalization test. So you can use Midjourney version 7 after you complete this without the personalization test affecting the output of your results. Now, I'm going to show you different images that essentially show the output results and compare them from the profile test to a regular test, and then we'll finally talk about draft mode within Midjourney version 7. So let's go ahead and take a look at some images. This was an image created by Midjourney version 6.1, and I have here the word baptism of many people and then just the word Ireland. No comma, no separation, no periods, nothing like that. You could see how these images kind of turned out. I never indicated that I needed it to be an illustration, but that's what these kind of seem to be like, right? Photos of illustrations. Now, if we go over here to the first Midjourney version 7 set of images that were created, which were created in front of you guys, this is much more realistic of what seems to be a lifelike experience. However, there are some logical issues to this drawing, I guess you could say. Now, if you look at this, this is representing a baptism. I like this idea here because it does use some logic into play, and I'll explain it in a minute. Supposedly, this is the priest that's going to be either doing the baptism or somebody here is getting baptized, but it seems that there's 1, 2, 3 people running the baptism, right? Here we have people also in the water. They're not wearing any kind of special kind of clothing. They're not... maybe it's a little even deformed at this point here, like these faces. We can't really exactly tell what this is. Of course, it's not specific. These images weren't specifically set. But if this was to be like a baptism within some sort of river or lake, it's not clear as to who's actually getting baptized. Is everyone getting baptized? Are they wearing special clothing? Like I said, because in most circumstances, in Catholic Christian traditions, people are dressing, a certain kind of garment to represent their baptism. But then again, it still gets the concept of, being in water, priest in the picture, people in the picture, some sort of celebration or ceremony. So in terms of the logic, you can see that the logic has improved. I didn't give any indication for it to be an illustration, so we have more photographs here. And like I said, compared to version 6.1, the logic is better. It does have better logic than version 6.1 as far as version 7. This one is one of the best, I might say. It's much more realistic of what's inside of a Catholic church. We have a crucifix in the background. We have people of all kinds of different shapes and sizes. We have a baby here that's wrapped in cloth. We have the priest, or the father in this case, who's going to baptize the kid or the baby. It kind of feels like the inside of a Catholic church. So it feels pretty interesting. And something that I will say, notice in my prompt, I never mentioned the words Catholic Church, but I wrote Ireland. Now, I don't know if this is something deep internal in Midjourney's programming, but how did Midjourney know that when we're referring to baptisms, for most people in Ireland, it happens to, be mentioned in the domain of Catholicism? I mean, there are some Orthodox Christian churches within Ireland, but I thought that was quite interesting and quite intelligent, actually, because Ireland, like I said, the majority of people who are Christian are, Catholics, and this is more of a Catholic church type style, not necessarily an Orthodox church style. So I know that's specifics, and I know that could be annoying that I'm talking about these things, but I figured I'd kind of let you in and see how advanced, in this case, the logics behind Midjourney version 7 is. It's safe to say that if you're paying for Midjourney version 6.1, you're going to be overall satisfied with Midjourney 7. I don't think they took a step back. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some natural issues with Midjourney version 7. This is a perfect example of this. If you look here, when I used my global V7 profile, we have a picture of what seems to be a happy family, maybe some family and friends, a priest, and then we have here this bowl, which usually where the priest, washes his hands. The baby is in the bowl. Very oddly interesting. This is not supposed to happen. It doesn't even make logical sense. So in this case, the profile training created more issues and errors than the generalized version 7. I don't really understand why we have to do this personalization test. I think maybe it's because Midjourney wants to create more art according to your preferences, but at the same time, like you just saw right now, I might prefer an illustration over a piece of art like this because I don't see it as something that I personally enjoy. But I might come to an image like this and select something that's completely opposite, which is a photograph. photographs and illustrations are pretty much diametrically opposed, right? So in my case, I'm choosing a mix of different images with no real basis or correlation to them. I have a random sample of all kinds of images that I prefer. So in my case, personalization is not going to be something that I will frequently use. In fact, if ever. Now, as far as the creation, I'm still impressed with the overall ability to capture some photorealism. This is a picture with the prompt baptism of many people, Ireland, and there are a lot of people in this image. Very, very interesting. Maybe version 6.1 was capable of creating something similar to this. And you know what? Let's not pontificate. Let's actually create some images. So, baptism of many people in Ireland. Let's go ahead and go to the settings here. Let's select version 6.1. And let's make sure actually our stylization is set to, in this case, 500. In my case, when I select version 7, it was automatically set to 100, so I don't want to kind of set this off, but let's see what comes of it. Let's test multiple times. So first off, I'm going to set this to fast just for the sake of the video. I'll set the aesthetics, or in this case, stylization to 500. I will submit, and then I'll do the same thing at a lower stylization, so stylization of 100, and then finally, we have here a stylization. I'm going to set it all the way to the max, set to 1,000. And these are all with version 7 used on Midjourney. So we'll compare the details. But once again, this is without the profile test. So once again, we have some issues with these images, the logics behind them, but it's still overall improved from version 6.1. And the reason why we're able to test logics is when we have a very simple prompt, but yet take some logical, intellectual ability to create the image, right? Because a baptism, yes, we all know pretty much what that is. We all know the concept of it, but once again, you have the concept of, are you going to put people on some sort of walkway or some street, kind of like this, and watching the baptism from a distance, or are you going to put them just in the middle of the water, right? There's a lot of things here that take some intellectual thinking. At a baptism, what kind of people are there? Are there priests? Are there bishops? Are there just normal congregation type people? How are they dressed? All these things take intellectual thinking. And you could see here that pretty much every single image is hinting on things, right? They're hinting on, okay, we understand that a priest has to be there, but why are all the people in the water? If all the people are in the water, if they're getting baptized, shouldn't they be dressed with different garment? And they absolutely should. Kind of like this photo, and this is an interesting one here. So you can see the logic play a part here. You have somebody dressed in this kind of garment, this garment, this garment. These kinds of images look awfully similar to a situation in real life, right? This seems to be some sort of illustration, and this is what seems to be much, much more realistic, not from a photo scope point of view, right? Not from a photograph as a photograph or illustration, but from a real life depiction. So here we have some priests, some bishops, right? We have somebody holding what seems to be like a pamphlet or a book, maybe have to read off what is going to be said in the ceremony. We have some people lining up in the background, dressed with, certain kinds of clothing that might potentially allude to, them being baptized. So it's quite interesting. I recommend that you guys try something out like this yourself. Give a general prompt to Midjourney, make an assumption, or you make a logical assumption of what should be there, and then just see and wait for the results. You're going to get some wacky outputs, but it's still quite interesting. Let's go ahead and try this with something a lot more simple. And I actually want to go back here to one of the images that I was creating earlier, which is this one. So here we have a young man sitting around his family at a dinner table in Viking times 400 AD illustration. We're going to be able to see how capable is Midjourney version 7 to create these images versus version 6.1. I'm going to show you some images on version 6.1, right? We have this image, this image, this image, and this image. I'll go ahead and say that this one is my favorite one out of the group. I just feel like overall it was really compromised really well, or composed really well, excuse me. And then let's go ahead and set our stylization here to 300. Let's go ahead and have that image submitted. We'll take the exact same thing with a different stylization and set it to 500. which matches the exact same stylization of this prompt, which was created in version 6.1. And then finally, just to keep up our tradition here, let's go ahead and click on the prompt once again, but let's increase our stylization to 1,000 like we did before. And let's see what kind of results we have. Now remember, the version with a 500 stylization is the one we're really comparing it to. So this is 300 version of stylization. Honestly, pretty good image, right? We have this image, and we have this image. Quite interesting. I could say with the illustration, since I didn't become too specific in my prompt, it kind of gave me a randomized version of an illustration. I didn't mention what kind. I didn't say chibi, I didn't say kawaii, I didn't say comic art. I didn't mention any kind of style. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is a 500 stylization, and we have an image like this, an image like this. Quite interesting. That guy looks like Brock Lesnar, by the way. Just figured I'd mention that. But anyways, we could go ahead and see here another image and another image. Okay, quite interesting as well. And then finally here, we have 1,000 stylization, which I have to say overall, out of all the different version 7 images, these set are probably my favorite. I'll let you know, I'll kind of let you guys in the comments say what you like more. But overall, guys, these are phenomenal images. Really done really, really well. Notice here the detail. Right? Once again, we're talking about the intellectual processing of Midjourney 7. We have a shield here, right? Viking shield. We have another Viking shield with this kind of Viking art painted, maybe these ruins or something. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're phenomenal art. Typically, in Viking history, on shields, you would have runes painted that represent strength and certain things that are, essentially what Vikings are carrying on their shield, right? They're these identities that they believe. Same things when they tattoo themselves. These are beliefs attached to certain designs. One of them representing strength, one of them representing protection, things like that. So the fact that these things are painted on the shield shows how intellectually advanced some of this stuff is. I don't want to go too deep into this, but this looks like some sort of fish or steak, right? Like a salmon or something, which is quite interesting because if you think of Viking tradition, and the prompt does mention Vikings, so think of Viking tradition, they're probably lived in, Norway, Finland, Sweden, those kind of areas where they have water access, where they're probably fishing these types of fish, whether it be trout or salmon. So there is some logic to it. As I do see some issues in the logic. So, for example, we have a wine glass here. Vikings didn't really have access to real wine glasses. Now, I'm not here to nitpick. I personally love this image. I'm not going to downgrade it in any way. But Vikings didn't really have glasses. They drank out of horns sometimes. You guys know, like the horns of a goat, for example, or a ram. That was pretty traditional. They maybe carved some out of wood. Some glasses or things like that, like cups, but they didn't have glasses, that's for sure. So, but overall, it's not something pretty bad. I mean, look at this image. This image is like some sort of wooden kind of structure. We have, some maybe tomatoes here, what seems to be like a lemon, but obviously Vikings didn't have access to lemons because citrus fruits don't grow in cold environments, but still, it's overall still pretty good. I mean, look at the art here. We have what seems to be like a Viking father, maybe with two daughters. Who knows? It's hard to tell. But at the end of the day, this is a phenomenal illustration set here of all kinds of different images, even this style, right? Overall, pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a look at some other types of images that we can think of creating. And I like to go here to the Explore page on Midjourney. Midjourney has a great Explore page here with all kinds of different images. I like to hit this little randomization button, and I like to create some of these images just to see what we can get. So let's pick an image like this for the ladies here. This is an attractive woman with long curly red hair, blue eyes, tattoo on her left arm, art style of Sydney Mead. I have no idea who that is, but let's go ahead and click on it. I'm sure it's some sort of artist. We'll hit generate. Now, the orientation is going to be a 16 by 9 orientation, just for the sake of it. We can compare different faces here. This is a version 7 type image, and then we're going to go take the same prompt, but this time go to a version 6.1. And we're going to go ahead and click on this and submit. Now, we have something called draft mode, and I will tackle that in just a minute after I complete this review, if per se. But you can see how quick the comparison is in creating images from version 7 to version 6.1. I'm not going to really put a number on it, but you guys can tell a difference in speed, right? When you saw me create this image set versus this image. In fact, if somebody wants to time it, you can go ahead and mention how long that time was in the comments. Now let's go ahead and tackle some of these images. The first thing is, which set looks more realistic? Does this image set look more realistic, or does this image set look more realistic? For me, guys, I have to say version 7's images look much more realistic. I'm sure this is where they kind of mentioned, and by the way, this is at a stylization of 1,000, so that has to be taken into account. But this is where Midjourney states, hey, Midjourney version 7 can produce better, more higher quality, hyper-realistic images. And that's what it seems to be here. I mean, just to me personally, I think these images are phenomenal, both of them, both sets, but I do see that Midjourney version 7 solves a greater need for hyper photorealistic type images. So if you want to create more photorealistic type images, definitely focus on using Midjourney version 7 a little bit more. You can see the difference here. Now, as far as draft mode, what draft mode is supposedly supposed to be is when Midjourney allows you to have these concepts, these ideas, these thoughts of what you want to create, but you can't really piece it all together. You can communicate to Midjourney what you want your images to be created as, and it will sort of bundle and create them in such a way where you're creating, spitfiring, if you will, these rapid fire images effectively. And so when you click on draft mode, you're going to see this button that says start voice mode. And you could use the typing feature instead if you want. I'm personally going to use voice mode. And you're essentially communicating to Midjourney what you want created. So let's go ahead and click on this here. I'm going to allow my microphone to gain access to Midjourney. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I want to create an image of a tree. A majestic tree in a enchanted forest kawaii design. Chibi art, purple, blue shimmering lights with a neon colored glowing tree. Okay, so I went ahead and stopped draft mode from occurring right there, but you can kind of see what I was looking to create. Now, as far as creating these images, on Midjourney, I think they're pretty cool if that's what you want to do. You want to create a whole bunch of images without having to sit down and manually typing things. However, this is not going to replace automation. So if you're familiar with my past automation videos, that's definitely not going to replace it. The whole concept of automation is for us to essentially walk away from the computer and have a bunch of images created for us. However, at the same time, if you are, for example, in my position where we're creating these documentary style history story videos on YouTube, and I am reading out maybe a script of a video, I could do that. I could read out a script and potentially images can slowly be created. So I'd read a portion of the script, I'd pause, it would submit that image, and then I'll read a little bit more, I'd pause, it would submit that as a prompt, and so on and so forth. And maybe after I finish reading the script, I can download the images that I choose, inject it into my video editor along with my voice recording, and kind of make it a done deal and help me edit my videos a little bit faster. That's a potential for this to essentially work, and an example of how it would be ideally used in a scenario for monetizational purposes. Now, I kind of talked about, mentioning the money aspect of Midjourney. Is it worth the cost? Well, you really have to break down what you're using it for and how much you're actually paying. Midjourney has a bunch of different tiers that you can pay for, for the subscription. It starts at about $15 a month, and it could go pretty high. I mean, so you have to really think about how much you're willing to pay for this thing. Now, me personally, I stick anywhere between the $30 and $60 a month tier rather, for multiple accounts. Now, this account here that you guys see here, this is something that I've created on YouTube. I create photos on YouTube here, and I don't mind sharing images like this. So, for example, when I share images like these for a video that I'm creating, I don't mind showing that video on the internet. But if there's some images that I want private, that I want to create for a business that I'm setting up that will be away from YouTube, I'll probably have a different account for those things. Speaking of different accounts, you guys know that I make money through stock photography, right? AI stock photography, that is. So I create an image, I submit it to, stock photography type sites, and I generate an income from those images. That is something where I do share an account in my members area on YouTube, and people like to see those type of videos, so I figure I can create these images where they're publicly seen, so it's no mystery, and then create the account as well where it's relatively publicly exposed through my members area, where I show people, different images I'm creating, what's being accepted, what's being rejected, and so on, and how much income I'm generating. And those are different examples of how I'd use the account. So it depends. I really don't recommend for anybody to go with the cheapest tier on Midjourney because you can only create 200 images. Once you create those 200 images, it's essentially finished. You're completed. You're done. The next best tier is probably the $30 tier, and so on and so forth, because you have this idea of unlimited relaxed generations, and the more relaxed generations you have, pretty much the better. So, although Midjourney does have throttling and does have things that slow you down, overall, you can't really go wrong with a $30 account as a beginner looking for how to monetize. Now, once again, it depends on how you're going to monetize. If you have a system that's already monetizable, I like to find multi-purposes for what I'm doing. So, for example, if I have a Midjourney account and I'm paying $30 a month for it, I might use some images that I'll show on YouTube, maybe record some tutorial videos, take some of those images, submit them to a stock photography site, and also take some images and then create a YouTube video, which, like I said, I just did, that is a documentary style video, and publish that to YouTube. Now, I've yet to publish the video, but I just finished editing it today. But that's essentially the point of what I'm saying, multi-purpose. So hopefully this video was enjoyable. Hopefully it was informative. If you think Midjourney version 7 is something you're going to incorporate in your daily workflow, let me know what you're using Midjourney for. And once again, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks for watching, and peace out. Bye.